Welcome back to the third day of the Aster Sewalong. This first step that we're going to do is just for the crop top or view A. If you're sewing up the dress, just hold tight and we will be circling back to the dress in just a minute. So go ahead and take your crop top, and with right sides together, you're going to line up the side seams of the front and back. Now make sure that your facing is extended while you're doing this, and you're going to match up those seam lines. Also, there is a notch on your back piece, and that is going to line up with the dart. So go ahead and pin that all the way down. Now once you have that all pinned, it's time to stitch. Now I do recommend that this is a good time to go ahead and baste and try on your Aster. So if this is your first time making it, you might want to baste that first at a 1/2 inch seam allowance and try it on. You can line up the backs along the center back marking that's on your pattern piece, and that will show you where the button and buttonhole would line up. Now once you're happy with the fit, go ahead and stitch that in a permanent stitch at a 1/2 inch seam allowance down both of the side seams. Make sure that your facing is extended up when you're doing this. Okay, so it should look something like this. Now, if you are leaving your top unlined, then you are going to finish the seam allowance in whatever way you prefer. So serging it or zigzag stitching or using pinking shears. Now I am going to be lining this, so that is not necessary. But I think that, it's pretty self-explanatory. One other thing that I forgot to show you on here but needs to be done is you should go ahead and press those seams at this point. Go ahead and either press the seam allowances open or press those seam allowances toward the back, depending on how you finish those seams. Now, if you're sewing up view A or the crop top, you're actually done for today. That was it, because the rest of today is all going to be dedicated to the dress view and sewing up the pockets and the side seams. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take all 4 of our pocket pieces and we are going to finish that outside curved edge. I'm going to be serging it. You can also, of course, use pinking shears or a zigzag stitch. Now, if you are lining your dress, this is not something that you need to do. So only if you're leaving your dress unlined do you need to finish these seam allowances. Otherwise, the pockets are going to be sandwiched in between your lining and your main dress, so it's just not necessary. Okay, it should look something like this. Now, I just want to note that this is a good time to go ahead and baste your side seams together and check fit if you want to do that. Once you attach the pockets to the side seams, it's really hard to adjust the hips. Do keep in mind that if you do check the fit of your Aster, make sure that you leave some ease in there, because this is a shift dress. If you do not leave enough ease in there, it's going to pull. You're going to have a really hard time sitting down, and also your pockets are going to pucker. So make sure you leave ease in there. It's intended for the pattern. Okay, so now we are going to actually attach the pockets to the side seams. So with right sides touching, you're going to pin one of the pockets to its corresponding side seam on the front and the back. You're going to match those notches and those dots. Make sure you do this for all 4 of the pocket pieces. Now once they're all pinned, we're going to go over to our sewing machine and we're going to stitch them at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So the reason why this is 3/8 and not the normal 1/2 an inch is we do this in a smaller seam allowance so that once the side seams are sewn up at the normal 1/2 an inch seam allowance, this pocket stays just slightly more tucked to the inside. It helps it stay tucked to the inside. It keeps it less visible. Okay, now if you are leaving your dress unlined like I am, you're going to finish the side seams of each of the front and back pieces. You're going to make sure that you're catching the pocket edge at the same time when you're doing that. You're also going to keep that facing pressed up when you're doing this. Now, once again, this is not necessary if you are adding a lining, because all of these seams will be tucked between your lining and your main dress. Okay, now that that seam allowance is all finished, we can go ahead and move back onto the pockets. So you're going to take each of your sides and your pocket, and you're actually going to press that pocket away from the front or the back and over the seam allowances. And now we are going to understitch the pocket. So you're going to be stitching into the pocket just past that seam line, and make sure you're catching those seam allowances underneath. So do that for all 4 of your pockets. Once again, I just want to sing the praises of understitching. So I know you might be tempted to skip this, but I really recommend that you don't. It will really help keep those pockets tucked to the inside and keep them from flipping out, which can be just super annoying. So don't skip this step. It is worth it. Okay, now that we've understitched those pockets, we are going to pin and stitch those side seams. So with right sides touching, we're going to pin the front to the back. Along those side seams, you're going to match the raw edges and the dots around those pocket areas. Keep those pockets extended. The top notch on the back piece is going to line up with the dart that's on the front. Now be extra careful when you're lining up the pockets and those dots and those notches. Those dots are going to be where you pivot when you're sewing around the pocket, so you want those to line up on the front and the back. So once you have it all pinned, you're going to go over to your sewing machine and you are going to stop at the edge of the facing. So the facing should be extended away from the main dress. You're going to stitch down to the first dot. You're going to leave that needle down and pivot to go all the way around the pocket until you hit that second dot. Then you're going to pivot to stitch down to the bottom edge of the dress. And you're doing all of this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So when you are stitching at the dot or like right over that pocket piece, remember that we attach the pocket at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So you're going to be just a teeny bit inside of that line of stitching. Okay, now the last thing that we want to do is we want to help secure that pocket towards the front dress. Since it is just hanging there in the side seam, we want to do everything that we can to make sure that it stays towards the front. So we are going to go ahead and press all of the seam allowances and the pocket towards the front dress. It's helpful to do this on both the front and the back of the dress, and then we're going to put a few pins in the pocket to make sure that everything stays flat and that the pocket is laying flat against the front dress. And then one very last thing that we're going to do to just help anchor that pocket towards the front dress is we're going to do a small line of stitching above and below the pocket opening, or right at about those dots. Make this about 3/8 of an inch in length, and that is once again just going to help anchor that pocket, not only as this is a stress point for the pocket, but also just helps keep that bag hanging towards the front of the dress. Okay, and that should do it for today. Come back tomorrow and we will finish up our aster.